There is a woman in this story who has eaten cold food her entire working life. Not because she could not cook. She could cook better than anyone in that house, better than the woman who owned that house, better than anyone on that street if we are being honest. She could take the simplest ingredients, a handful of crayfish, half a tomato, leftover rice from yesterday, and turn them into something that made people close their eyes when they tasted it. But she never ate her own cooking warm, not in that house. Because in that house, she ate last. She ate what was left. She ate what was given to her after everyone else had finished, after the pots had gone cold, after the family had risen from the table and gone to watch television, and the kitchen had settled into its end-of-evening quiet. She ate last and she ate least and she ate in silence and she never complained. Not once, not in 11 years. Because she had a reason to stay quiet. She had a reason to endure. She had a reason that was bigger than cold food and small portions, and a woman who looked at her like she was furniture that had learned to walk. Her reason was her son. His name was Emeka, and he was going to be somebody. She knew it the way mothers know things, not from evidence, not from proof, but from something deeper and older than proof. She had known it when he was 4 years old and drew pictures on the walls of their single room in Age Gunnel, and they were not the scribbles of a 4-year-old. They were something else. They were alive. She had known it when he was 12 and stayed up until midnight with a borrowed pencil drawing portraits of the neighbors, and they looked back at you from the paper with their exact, specific, irreplaceable faces. She had known it when he was 17 and his art teacher had called her aside after a school exhibition and said, "Mrs. Adjora, your son is not ordinary. Your son is exceptional." She knew it. And because she knew it, she stayed. She stayed in that house with the cold food and the cruel woman and the shrinking portions and the cutting remarks. She stayed because every month, the salary, small as it was, went into the envelope that went to Emeka's art school fees. And every naira in that envelope was a step further down the road that she had decided, in the absolute certainty of a mother's love, that her son was going to walk. She walked the hard road so he could walk the good one. And for 11 years, that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. But then came the day that was not like the other days. The day when the woman of that house, a woman named Mrs. Bissy Coker, a woman who had spent 11 years testing how far cruelty could be stretched before it snapped back, crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. She ordered Adjora to take her plate of food outside, to the backyard, where the dogs ate. "You can eat with them," Mrs. Coker said, with the particular small smile of a person who has never in their life faced a consequence. Same level. Adjora picked up her plate. She walked to the back door. She sat outside on the ground next to 2 dogs named Brutus and King, and she began to eat her cold rice. She did not cry. She was past crying about things like this. What she did not know, what nobody in that house knew, was that at that exact moment, 3 streets away, a matte black Lamborghini Urus was turning off the main road. At the wheel of that Lamborghini was a young man in a white linen shirt with paint-stained fingers and eyes that had not slept properly in 24 hours because he had been driving since 4 in the morning to reach this address. The address his mother had never told him was as bad as it was. The address he had found himself. His name was Emeka Adjora. He was 29 years old. He was a multimillionaire. And he was about to end 11 years of suffering in the time it took to step out of a car. If you are ready, if you believe that patience always has a payday, that a mother's sacrifice always finds its reward, that cruelty always gets answered, then stay right here. This story is for every mother who ever ate cold food so her child could eat warm. This one is for her. Like this video right now if you believe a mother's love is the most powerful force on earth. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub and ring that notification bell. We tell the stories that matter. Comment below. Has your mother ever sacrificed something huge for you? Tell us. Honor her right here. Her full name was Ajora Chidinma Obi. She was born in 1971 in Ennui, Anambra State, a city famous for its traders, its engineers, its hard-working people who believed, with a conviction that bordered on religion, that no condition is permanent, and that with sufficient effort the world could be rearranged in your favor. She grew up in a compound house on a street where 12 families shared 2 water taps, and the generator ran for 4 hours a day. And everybody knew everybody's business and nobody's business was ever entirely their own. Her father was a motor mechanic named Celestine. He was a man of limited formal education and unlimited practical intelligence, the kind of man who could diagnose an engine fault by listening to it with his eyes closed, and who fixed things not just in his shop but in the neighborhood, generators, radios, bicycles, the occasional television. He was not a wealthy man, but he was a respected one, and in the particular moral economy of that Ennui street, respect was a currency that bought real things. Her mother was a petty trader named Ngozi who sold fabric from a table outside their compound gate. She woke at 5 every morning, laid out her table, called out to passers-by with a voice like a radio advertisement, and by the time the morning school rush was over she had usually sold enough to cover the day's food and put a little aside. Ngozi had a philosophy that she repeated so often it became the wallpaper of Ajora's childhood. Small money saved every day builds big money over time. There is no shortcut, there is only the next step. Ajora was the second of 4 children. She was, by temperament, the quiet one, not shy, not timid, but a listener. She watched people more than she spoke to them. She noticed things. She remembered conversations that other people forgot. She had an inner life of considerable richness that she shared with very few people, which was often mistaken for simplicity by people who had not bothered to look carefully. She completed secondary school. She wanted to go further. She had a particular interest in accounting, which she had been good at in school, numbers having a logic and honesty that appealed to her listening nature. But the year she finished secondary school was the year her father's health began failing. His knees, then his back, then something with his heart that the local clinic said required surgery that cost more than the family had seen in 5 years combined. The further education went on hold. It stayed on hold. She did not resent this. She was not built for resentment. What she was built for was the next step, her mother's philosophy in her blood now, whether she knew it or not. She found work. She helped. She took over the fabric stall when her mother needed to be at the hospital. She did what needed doing, and she did it without making a performance of it, because performance requires an audience and she had no interest in one. She met Chukwudi Obi when she was 23. He was 27, a driver for a logistics company, a gentle man with a gap between his front teeth and a habit of humming tunelessly when he was happy. They married in 1995, a small ceremony, her family's compound, her mother's best fabric on the table. They moved to Lagos, to Agegunnel specifically, which was the neighborhood that Lagos offered to people who were just beginning, who had not yet accumulated enough to reach somewhere else. It was crowded and loud, and the roads were bad and the water was unreliable, but it was alive in a way that only very dense human habitation can be alive, and Ajora found, to her own mild surprise, that she did not mind it. Emeka was born in 1996. The birth was at a maternity clinic on a Tuesday night, and Chukwudi held Ajora's hand for 6 hours and hummed tunelessly the entire time, which she would tell Emeka about later, when he was old enough to find it funny instead of embarrassing. From the first months, Emeka was a child of visual intensity. He looked at things, not in the distracted way of Bobby's, not the normal sweeping glance of an infant cataloging the world, but with a specific, focused attention that pediatricians would probably call something clinical, but that Ajora simply called his. He looked at colors. He looked at light. He looked at faces with the concentrated seriousness of someone trying to memorize them. He was 3 when he first drew. He used a burnt stick from the cooking area. They had a kerosene stove, but Chukwudi had improvised a small open fire for certain dishes, and he drew on the floor of their one-room apartment. He drew a face. It was Adjora's face. It was not perfect, he was 3 years old, but it had her eyes, the specific slight tilt of her brows, the particular set of her mouth. Adjora looked at it for a long time. "How did you do this?" she asked. Emeka shrugged with the casual authority of a 3-year-old, who has not yet learned that doing extraordinary things requires explanation. "That's your face," he said, "and when I find something else to do." Adjora kept the floor mark for months, covering it carefully when they swept, showing visitors, watching their faces change when they looked from the drawing to her and back again. She showed it to Chukwudi, who looked at it for a long time with his gap-toothed smile and then said, "This boy is different." They were happy. It was not a wealthy happiness or a comfortable happiness, but it was genuine and warm and sufficient. Chukwudi drove his lorries and brought home his salary, and Adjora managed the home with her mother's arithmetic, the careful daily saving, the deliberate next step, and Emeka grew and drew on every available surface, and the three of them occupied their one room in Agegunnel with the easy intimacy of people who have never expected more space than they need. Then 2002 arrived. Chukwudi had been having headaches. He did not tell Adjora about them at first. He was a man of the generation and background that treated silence about pain as a form of strength. By the time he mentioned them, they had been happening for 4 months. By the time they got him to a proper hospital, the diagnosis was a brain aneurysm. It had been bleeding slowly. The damage was already significant. He died on a Thursday morning in April, in a hospital bed in Isolo, with Adjora holding his hand. Emeka was 6 years old. He was at school when it happened. Adjora had to go and collect him and bring him home and tell him. She sat him down on the edge of their bed. She took his hands. She looked at his face, his father's face, with her own eyes in it, and she told him, simply and clearly, because Emeka had always been a child who responded better to truth than to cushioning. "Your father is gone," she said. "He died this morning. He loved you completely. He will always love you, and I am here. I am not going anywhere." Emeka looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his pencil from the floor beside the bed and he drew something. He drew quickly, as if he needed to do something with his hands to contain what his chest was feeling. When he was done, he showed her. He had drawn Chukwudi, the gap-toothed smile, the particular way he held his shoulders, the humming, which of course could not be drawn but which Emeka had somehow suggested with the expression on the face he gave his father in the drawing. "So I don't forget," Emeka said. Adjora held the drawing. She held it until her hands stopped shaking. She did not cry in front of him. She cried at night, after he was asleep, quietly into her wrapper, and then she dried her face and she thought about the next step. The next step was work. She had been managing the home and doing occasional petty trading while Chukwudi drove. Now she needed a salary, a regular, dependable salary. She had skills. She could cook, she could clean, she could manage a household with the precision of someone who had been doing it her whole life. She registered with a domestic staff agency. She took the first placement offered. The first house was fine, a middle-class family in Surulere. 2 children, reasonable people, the madam slightly demanding but not cruel. She stayed for 2 years. The salary was modest, but she saved every naira she did not need for Emeka's upkeep and school materials. The second house was in Ikja, less fine. The madam there had a habit of accusing staff of theft when items she herself had misplaced eventually turned up. Adjora was accused once. She did not argue. She found the item, a bracelet, behind the dresser, presented it silently, and continued working. She stayed for 1 year and 3 months until a better opportunity appeared. The better opportunity was a house on Admiralty Way in Lekki Phase 1, a larger house, better salary. The owners were a couple named Mr. and Mrs. Bissy Coker. It seemed at first better. It was not, in fact, better, but it took time for that to become entirely clear. The Coker house was impressive by the standards of the neighborhood, which were already high. It was a four-bedroom detached property with a compound large enough for 3 cars, a small garden that somebody had once tended with care, and that had been slowly declining for want of ongoing attention, and a boys' quarters at the back where 2 dogs named Brutus and King lived in a wire enclosure with a concrete floor and more space per capita than many humans in Lagos enjoyed. Mr. Rodamy Coker was a civil engineer who worked for a government ministry. He was 51 when Ajora arrived, a quiet, careful man who communicated primarily through noncommittal sounds, a hum of acknowledgement, a ah of surprise, an occasional okay that could mean agreement or dismissal depending on the context. He was not unkind to the household staff. He was also not the person who ran the household. That person was his wife. Mrs. Bissy Coker was 47. She was from Ibadan originally, educated to secondary school level, had worked briefly as a secretary before her marriage, and had not worked professionally since. She was not an unintelligent woman. Stupidity would have been more forgivable than what she actually was, which was a person of moderate intelligence and enormous social insecurity who had discovered, in the running of her household and the management of her domestic staff, the only arena in which she felt entirely in control. She had grown up the third of 5 children in a household that was one step above poverty, not quite in it but close enough to see it clearly, which is sometimes worse than being inside it because the proximity creates a particular anxiety that wealth alone does not resolve. She had married Rodamy partly for love, and partly because his government salary and his profession represented a safe distance from the proximity she feared. Over the years, as the distance became established, as the house in Lekki became real and the cars became possible, and the certain kind of Lagos respectability she had wanted became hers, the anxiety had not disappeared. It had simply relocated. It now lived in the gap between what she had and what she saw others having. It lived in the comparison. The domestic staff were the one place where comparison did not apply. The maid was beneath her absolutely, inarguably, by every social measure she recognized. And this clear, unambiguous superiority, was something she needed more than she would ever have admitted, more than she possibly even understood about herself. She ran the house with elaborate rules, many of which were not stated but simply existed, hanging in the air of each room, sensed by anyone who worked there. Rules about which surfaces could be touched and how. Rules about noise levels and times of speaking, and what could be said in whose presence. Rules about food and portions and timing and who sat where and who used what. The food rules were the ones that Yora noticed first. In the first month she observed the pattern without comment. The family ate at 7. She ate at 8:30 or 9 after the kitchen was cleaned. What was left of the dinner was placed, not served, not arranged, but placed, the way you set out an item you are disposing of rather than presenting on a plate for her. The portions were small. The food was cold. This was the system and she understood it and she adapted to it because she had adapted to worse and she had an envelope to fill each month. The remarks started in the second month. Small remarks, delivered with the particular precision of a person who has calibrated their cruelty to fly just under the threshold of what would force an explicit response. Comments about the quality of Ajora's cooking when she had cooked it exactly as instructed. Comments about the standard of her cleaning that appeared immediately after she had completed a cleaning task. Comments delivered in the presence of visitors, casually, as if sharing an observation rather than inflicting an injury. Ajora, the pots are not cleaned properly. I don't know how many times I have to say it. Said in front of Mrs. Coker's sister, who was visiting for the weekend and who looked uncomfortable, and who Ajora suspected was not actually looking at the pots. She's been with us 2 months and I still have to check everything twice. Said to Mr. Coker in the corridor, loudly enough that it was clearly meant to be heard through the kitchen wall where Ajora was washing dishes. Adjora absorbed these remarks with the practiced ease of someone who had been absorbing things for years. She said sorry, Ma, when apology was expected. She improved where there was something genuine to improve. She ignored everything else with an interior composure that was not indifference. She felt every word, but that she had learned to contain so thoroughly that it did not show. She was thinking about the envelope. She was thinking about Emeka. Because Emeka, by the time she arrived at the Coker house, was 12 years old and was already filling notebooks with drawings that made art teachers go quiet with something between awe and recognition. He was at school in Agegunnel, a public school decent enough, with one art teacher named Mr. Bangbos who had immediately identified what Emeka was and had started giving him extra time, extra materials, access to a small storage room after school hours where Emeka could work without anyone disturbing him. Mr. Bangbos had called Adjora in for a meeting in Emeka's first year of junior secondary school. Mrs. Obi, he had said, sitting across from her in the small staff room that smelled of chalk and old paper, I want to be direct with you. Please, she said. Your son draws the way some people breathe. It is not a skill. It is a language. He thinks in images. When he looks at something, he sees it at a depth that most adults never reach. Do you understand what I am saying? Tell me, she said. I am saying that if this boy does not receive serious art training, formal training, proper school, not just what I can give him in a public school storeroom, it will be a loss. Not just for him. A real loss. The kind that matters. Adjora sat with this. She was quiet for a moment. How expensive is formal art training? She asked. Mr. Bangbos had done some research before the meeting. He slid a paper across the desk. It was a list of 3 art schools, 1 private secondary school with a strong arts program, 1 dedicated art school, and a third option which was a Saturday class program at a private studio that was less expensive than the others but still significant. Adjora looked at the numbers. She did the arithmetic in her head quickly, the way her mother had taught her, the way she had always done it. Give me a year, she said. A year. I need a year to arrange it. Mr. Bangbos looked at her. He had been a teacher for 18 years. He had met many parents. He knew the difference between a parent who was stalling and a parent who was making a plan. This woman was making a plan. I will keep him in the storeroom, he said. A year is nothing for talent like this. Adjora went home that evening. She sat at the small table in her room in the boys' quarters of whichever house she was working in at the time, and she looked at the numbers and she calculated. She looked at her salary. She looked at what she sent to her mother in Ennui each month. She looked at what she needed for Emeka's food and transport and basic school materials. She looked at the remainder. The remainder was not enough. She needed a higher salary. She needed the Coker house, which was offering more than she was currently earning, and which she had been hesitating about because of certain things she had heard from the domestic staff agency about Mrs. Coker's reputation with maids. She stopped hesitating. She took the Coker position. She started the envelope. Every month, after everything that needed to be sent and paid was sent and paid, the remainder went into an envelope that she kept inside a folded wrapper at the bottom of her travel bag. Every month the envelope grew slightly thicker. Every month she counted it and calculated how many months until the art school fees could begin. It took 14 months, not 12 as she had hoped, because there were expenses she had not anticipated. Emeka's school shoes wore out, her mother needed medication. A rainy season leak in the boys' quarters cost her 2 weeks of savings and repairs she had to fund herself. But at 14 months she had enough. She enrolled Emeka in the Saturday studio program first. She increased her hours when the Coker house offered overtime for a renovation project. She saved the overtime. A year after the Saturday program began, she moved Emeka to the dedicated art school. She was 40 years old. She was working 6 days a week in the Coker house. She was sleeping in a room in the boys' quarters that was smaller than the dog's enclosure, but that she kept immaculately clean, and in which she had placed two items of personal significance: a photograph of Chukwudi and a framed copy of the first drawing Emeka had ever made of her. The drawing was now slightly yellowed at the edges, and the frame had a small crack in the lower left corner, but she had never replaced it, and she never would. This was her life. She did not consider it a bad life. She considered it a purposeful life, which is a different and better thing. Every element of it, the early mornings, the late nights, the cold food, the cutting remarks, the envelope, the boys' quarters, the cracked frame, every element was a stone in the road she was building for her son to walk on. She was building something. She was always building something. She just could not see, from inside the building, how magnificent the thing she was building was going to be. Emeka Obi grew up knowing two things with absolute certainty. The first was that his mother loved him more than any word he had ever learned was large enough to contain. The second was that he was going to make something of himself if it was the last thing he did on this earth. Not for himself, for her. He was going to make something so large and so real and so undeniable that she would never have to eat cold food again. Never have to say, "Sorry, Ma," to anyone. Never have to fold herself small to fit inside someone else's definition of her worth. He was going to make something, and when it was made, he was going to go back for her. That was the plan. From the age of 12, from the conversation his mother had, unknown to him, with Mr. Bangbos, which she summarized for him that evening simply as, "Your teacher says you have real talent, and we are going to find a way to train it properly." From that age, Emeka Obi had a plan. The plan had two parts. Part 1 was, become the best artist he could possibly become. Part 2 was, turn that skill into a life that could support both of them. Not in the vague way of artistic dreams, not in the way of hoping that talent alone would be sufficient. Emeka had grown up watching his mother calculate and save and plan, and he had absorbed her pragmatism as completely as he had absorbed his father's gentleness and his own native gift. He understood that talent was material. Like clay, like paint, like charcoal, it was raw and it needed to be worked. He worked it. At the Saturday studio in Lagos, he worked it under the instruction of a woman named Mrs. Funk Ademi, a trained fine artist who had studied in the UK and returned to Lagos to run the studio because, as she told her students with the calm certainty of someone who has made peace with every consequence of a decision, Lagos is where the work is. She was exacting and honest and generous in the way that the best teachers are. She did not soften criticism, but she gave it with the clear intention of making you better, which made it land differently than Mrs. Coker's kitchen remarks. She saw Emeka in his first class and said nothing particular to him. She let him work. She watched. At the end of the 3-hour session, when the other students were packing up, she came to stand beside his easel. He had painted a Lagos street scene. Agegunnel specifically, the road outside their compound, the water tap, the generator, the women with children on their backs, the man selling roasted corn from a rusted wheelbarrow. It was not a romanticized version. It was exact and true, the peeling paint, the puddles with reflected sky in them, the particular quality of Lagos afternoon light that turns everything amber and gold before it goes completely away. Mrs. Ademi looked at it for a full minute. "How old are you?" she asked. 13. "When did you start painting?" "Drawing since I was small, painting for about 8 months. She was quiet again. "Do you know what you have here?" she asked. "A street," he said. "No," she said. "You have light. You understand how light falls on things. Most professional artists spend years learning that. You already have it." She paused. "Don't let anyone tell you what to paint. Don't let anyone give you a style. Paint what you see. Paint exactly what you see as honestly as you can. The rest will follow." He never forgot this. It became the foundation of everything. Paint what you see, exactly, honestly. When he moved from the Saturday program to the dedicated art school, he carried this with him. When the art school opened doors to techniques and traditions and movements and influences that expanded his vocabulary. When he discovered chiaroscuro and Impressionism and Expressionism and African modernism, and the particular luminous tradition of West African painting that had its own history and depth. He carried it through all of that. He never stopped painting what he saw. He never stopped painting honestly. He painted Lagos. He painted Agegunnel. He painted the water tap and the generator and the roasted corn man. He painted his mother, again and again and again, in every medium, in every light condition, at every age. He painted her hands particularly, those working hands with their particular set and strength. He painted her face when she was tired, and when she was at prayer, and when she was laughing, which was less frequent than it should have been but more frequent than an outsider might have expected. He painted her from memory on the evenings she could not visit. He painted her from life on the Sundays she came to Agegunnel to check on him and bring food she had somehow arranged from the Coker household kitchen during the week. At 17, in his final year at the art school, he entered a Lagos State Youth Arts competition. It was not the most prestigious competition in the country, but it was real and the judges were professionals, and the prize was a grant of 200,000 naira and inclusion in a group exhibition at a private gallery in Victoria Island. He won. He did not call his mother immediately when they told him. He sat with it first alone in the small studio space at the art school where he worked, and he held it, 200,000 naira and a gallery exhibition. He calculated quickly, the way his mother had always calculated, 200,000 naira. The art school fees his mother had been paying were 350,000 a year. She had been paying for 3 years. That was over 1,000,000 naira. From a maid's salary, saved in an envelope month by month, step by step. He called her that evening. She picked up on the second ring. Emeka. Mama, his voice was steady but his hands were shaking slightly. I won the competition. Silence, a breath. Which competition? The Lagos State one, the big one, 200,000 naira in a gallery show. Another silence, longer. Emeka, she said, and her voice had changed. It had the quality that voices get when something has shifted, when something that was held very tight for a long time begins just slightly to release. Say it again. I won, Mama, 200,000 naira. On the other end of the line, in the boys' quarters of the Coker house, sitting on the edge of her narrow bed with the cracked frame drawing on the wall, Ajora Obi covered her face with her free hand and she cried. She did not try to stop it. For once, for just this once, she did not try to contain it. She let it come. I'm sorry, she said when she could speak. I'm sorry, Don't apologize, Emeka said. His voice had broken slightly. He was 17 and he was crying too, 3 streets away in a studio that smelled of linseed oil and turpentine. Don't apologize for anything. My son, she said, just that, my son. Like it was a full sentence, a complete thought, the entire content of everything she believed. I'm going to take care of you, he said, Mama. I promise, I'm going to take care of you. You already are, she said. Every picture you draw, you already are. The gallery exhibition happened 2 months later, 23 of Emeka's paintings. The Victoria Island Gallery was a real gallery, white walls, proper lighting, the kind of quiet that private art spaces cultivate, a guest list of Lagos's creative and business community. People came who did not know who Emeka Obi was. People left knowing. A woman named Dr. Chisom Okonkwo was at the opening. She was 44, a cardiologist by training who had retired from medical practice to run an arts foundation she had established with her inheritance, a foundation called the Lagos Light Foundation that identified and funded young Nigerian visual artists. She had attended many gallery openings. She had seen many young artists. She had a particular quality of attention, developed over years, that told her within minutes of looking at a body of work whether there was something real there or something merely competent. She stood in front of Emeka's largest canvas, a 6-foot painting of the age-gunnel water tap at dusk, the gathered women with their plastic jerry cans, the reflected gold of the fading light on the water surface, for 11 minutes without moving. She found Emeka at the drinks table. "You painted that?" She tilted her head toward the large canvas. "Yes, Ma." "How long have you been painting?" "Seriously, 4 years." "What do you want to do with this?" He looked at her steadily. "Everything," he said. Dr. Okonkwo offered him a fellowship, a 2-year fully funded program, studio space, living allowance, mentorship from established Nigerian artists, and at the end of it, a solo exhibition at the Foundation's main gallery space in Ikoyi. She had offered this fellowship to 6 young artists in the Foundation's history. 2 of them were now represented by international galleries. 1 had been acquired by a museum in London. Emeka called his mother that night. "Mama," he said, "something has happened." He told her about the fellowship. He told her about the living allowance, which was more per month than his mother earned in 3 months at the Coker House. He told her about the studio and the mentorship and the exhibition. He told her what Dr. Okonkwo had said about the 2 previous fellows now in international galleries. Ajora listened to all of it. "Accept it," she said when he was finished. "I already did," he said. A pause. Then she laughed. That particular laugh of hers, not large, not loud, but completely genuine, the sound of a person who is happy without reservation. "Good," she said, "good." The fellowship changed Emeka's life in the way that the right opportunity, meeting the right person at the right moment, changes a life completely, and in ways that take years to fully understand. The studio space in Ikoyi was the largest he had ever worked in. High ceilings, north-facing windows that let in the flat, consistent light that painters prefer, a proper ventilation system, racks for canvases, a materials budget that seemed, to someone who had been carefully stretching whatever supplies he could afford, almost surreal. He walked in on his first day and stood in the middle of the room and turned slowly in a circle and said nothing for a while. Then he got to work. He painted for 16 months without stopping in any meaningful sense. He slept the minimum required. He ate quickly and without ceremony. He painted Lagos again, but now with the time and space and resources to paint it at the scale and depth it deserved. Large canvases, ambitious compositions. The water tap painting had been 6 feet. Now he was working at 8 feet, 10 feet. He was painting the city the way a city deserves to be painted, with all its contradictions present and unresolved, with its beauty and its difficulty side by side, with the particular quality of its light which was different from any light he had read about in European art history texts, which was African light, Lagos light, sharp and hot and honest. The mentors helped, not by telling him what to do, he already knew what to do, but by showing him what was possible, by introducing him to the work of artists he had not encountered, by pushing him to think about his work not just as painting but as practice, as a body of work with a philosophy and a direction and a reason, by teaching him what Dr. Okonkwo called the conversation, the dialogue between an artist's work and the broader world of art and ideas, the way a painting exists not just as an object, but as a response to everything that came before it, and a proposition about what might come after. He learned this conversation. He learned it eagerly, the way he had learned everything, not by waiting to be taught, but by actively pursuing what he needed to know. He also, during these 2 years, discovered something he had not anticipated. He discovered that he had a particular way of speaking about his own work. When collectors, Dr. Okonkwo brought serious collectors to the studio regularly, as part of the fellowship's exposure program. When collectors stood in front of his paintings and asked him about them, he found that he could talk about them in a way that made the paintings more alive. Not more comprehensible, they were already clear, but more present. He could articulate not just what the painting showed, but what it meant to paint it, what he was trying to say about light and dignity, and the particular beauty of ordinary Nigerian life that was routinely overlooked or aestheticized into something it was not. He was not performing. He was thinking out loud, but the effect on collectors was significant. They listened with the particular quality of attention that people give to someone who is saying something genuine. The first significant sale happened at a studio visit 18 months into the fellowship. A Lagos businessman named Mr. Adebola Fashola, who had made his money in real estate and was building a collection that he intended, he said, to eventually donate to a public gallery, stood in front of the Age-Gunnel water tap painting for 8 minutes and then turned to his assistant and said something quietly. The assistant wrote something down. After the visit, Dr. Okonkwo told Emeka that Mr. Fashola had offered 4 million naira for the water tap painting. Emeka sat down. 4 million naira. He was 19 years old. He sat down and he looked at his hands, his paint-stained, charcoal-marked, linseed oil-smelling hands, and he said very quietly, "Can I have a moment?" "Take all the time you need," Dr. Okonkwo said. He called his mother. She was at the Coker house. She whispered, she always whispered when she called from inside the house, not wanting Mrs. Coker to know she was on a personal call during working hours. "Emeka, is something wrong?" "No," he said, "nothing is wrong. Mama, I sold a painting today." "Good, good," she whispered. "How much?" He told her. Silence, a very long silence. "Say that number again," she whispered. He said it again. More silence. "Emeka," her voice had gone to almost nothing. "Emeka, are you telling me the truth?" "Yes." 4 million, yes, 4 million naira. On the other end of the line, Ajora Obi sat down on the concrete step of the boys' quarters, and she pressed her phone against her chest, and she looked at the compound wall and she breathed. Just breathed. She did not cry this time. She was past crying. She was into something else, something larger and calmer and more like the feeling you get at the top of a very long climb when you turn around and see how far you have come. "Mama Grace would have been so proud," she said, when she put the phone back to her ear. Chukwudi, Emeka said, his father's name. He used it deliberately, as he always did, to keep his father present in the conversation. "Both of them," she said, "your father and you, I am proud." "I know, Mama. Don't spend it foolishly." He laughed. "I won't. Save some." "Mama." "Save some," she repeated, with the calm authority of a woman who had spent 19 years saving some. "The next step always comes." He saved some. He invested wisely, with advice from Dr. Okonkwo and from a financial advisor she recommended. He continued painting. The solo exhibition at the end of the fellowship, 41 paintings, 3 years of work, the most ambitious body of work he had produced, opened to a full house and was reviewed in 3 Lagos publications and 1 London arts magazine that had been following Dr. Okonkwo's foundation because of its previous alumni. The London Review was the thing that changed the scale. It was written by a critic named James Hartley, who wrote for a magazine called Contemporary African Art Review. He had attended the exhibition as part of a Lagos arts tour he was making for a long-form piece about the new generation of West African painters. He had not expected to be stopped in his tracks. He had seen many Lagos galleries. His review began. "The paintings of Emeka Obi do something very rare in contemporary African art. They refuse to be consumed easily. They will not perform for you. They will not explain themselves. They ask you instead to look. And when you look, you find that they have been looking back at you the whole time." It ran to 1,400 words. It was shared widely in international art circles. 3 gallery inquiries arrived from London in the following week, 1 from New York. Emeka was 21 years old. What followed the next 8 years was the kind of trajectory that sounds described at speed, like fantasy, but that was, in actual lived experience, nothing like fantasy at all. It was work. Relentless, exacting, sometimes exhausting, frequently uncertain work. It was negotiations with galleries and collectors and agents. It was the particular discipline of maintaining a creative practice at the highest level while simultaneously managing the commercial and logistical reality of an art career that was growing faster than he had infrastructure to support. He needed infrastructure. He built it. He was 22 when he incorporated Obi Art, not a gallery, not exactly an agency, but a hybrid entity that managed his own work, and that, over the following years, began representing other young Nigerian artists he identified and believed in. He had learned from Dr. Okonkwo that the way to build something sustainable in the arts was not to wait for the international market to come to Nigeria, but to build the infrastructure in Nigeria that the international market would have to engage with on Nigerian terms. He was 23 when Obi Art signed its first international partnership, a collaboration with a London gallery for a Lagos-London joint exhibition program. He was 24 when a painting from his second solo exhibition sold at an auction in London for the equivalent of 43 million naira. He was sitting in his Lagos studio when the auction house called with the result, and he had to ask them to repeat it twice. He called his mother. She was at the Coker house. She was always at the Coker house. "Mama," he said, "the auction." "Tell me." He told her. This time she did not ask him to say it again. She simply said, "Come and get me." He said, "Soon, Mama, soon." He meant it, but soon kept getting redefined by the pace of what was happening. The business was growing at a rate that required his constant attention. Obi Art had 12 represented artists. They had a proper office in Victoria Island. They had staff, a business manager, a logistics coordinator, an international sales representative. Emeka was working 18-hour days, and the work was extraordinary, and he was building something real, something that mattered, something that would outlast any individual painting. But his mother was still in the Coker house. He sent money, every month significant money, enough that she did not need to work, enough that she could have left immediately and lived comfortably. He said this to her regularly. He said, "Mama, you don't have to be there anymore. You can come and stay with me. I have the space." She said every time, "Finish what you are building, don't worry about me, I am fine." She said she was fine. He believed her because he needed to believe her, because the alternative, stopping to investigate what fine really meant in the Coker house, would have required him to redirect attention from the building, and the building was what she had sacrificed everything for, and stopping it felt like wasting the sacrifice. He was wrong to believe her. He would come to understand this. But he was 25, 26, 27, and the business was accelerating, and the international reputation was real now, and the money was transforming from significant to substantial, and he was building, 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 and his mother said she was fine. He was 28 when the company passed the threshold. Not because of one event or one deal, but because of the accumulation, the years of work, the represented artists, the auction results, the international partnerships, the Lagos infrastructure, the reputation that had been built stone by stone, the company valuation, the personal portfolio, the investments, the property he had begun acquiring in Lagos. He was, at 28, by any conventional measure, a multimillionaire. He bought the Lamborghini at 28 and a half, not as a statement, not as performance. He bought it because he had wanted one since he was 15 years old, when he had seen one on Azumba Mbadu in Victoria Island and had stood on the pavement and looked at it for so long that a security guard had come out of the building and asked if he was all right. He was all right. He had just decided that he was going to own one someday. He was 28 and a half and he owned one. And on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after he bought it, at 4 o'clock in the morning, he got a call. Not from his mother, from a neighbor. The neighbor's name was Mrs. Felicia Adami. She lived 2 houses down from the Coker property on Admiralty Way. She was a retired schoolteacher, 70 years old, with no particular connection to Ajora beyond the small daily recognitions of proximity. A wave over the compound wall, an exchange of pleasantries at the estate gate, the kind of low-level human acknowledgement that exists between people who occupy the same physical space without being friends. But Mrs. Felicia Adami had eyes, and she had a particular old-fashioned belief, genuinely held, the kind that comes from a life of teaching children and watching what happens to them when adults around them fail to act, that seeing something wrong and not doing anything about it was its own kind of wrong. She had been watching the Coker house for months, not deliberately, not with the focused attention of surveillance, but in the peripheral way that people who live alone and keep careful eyes on their neighborhood watch things. She had seen the patterns. She had seen Ajora eating in the yard, sometimes the small food, the leftover portions, brought out in a bowl and consumed near the wall. She had seen the way Mrs. Coker spoke to Ajora when they were both visible in the compound. The posture, the gestures, the particular body language of a person who considers another person beneath their basic consideration. She had told herself more than once that it was not her business. But the evening before the call, she had seen something from her kitchen window that was over whatever line she had drawn for "not my business." She had seen Mrs. Coker carry a plate of food out to the backyard. She had seen Ajora follow her. She had seen Ajora sit on the concrete ground, next to the dog's enclosure, and eat. She had watched for several minutes, in the thin, shocked way you watch something when you cannot quite believe it is real. Then she went inside and found the phone number. She had gotten it from Ajora 2 years earlier, when Ajora had asked if she might use Mrs. Felicia's phone in an emergency because her own phone had been confiscated by Mrs. Coker. Another incident, another boundary crossed. At the time, Mrs. Felicia had written her son's number down. "For emergencies," Ajora had said, "in case anything happens." Mrs. Felicia called the number at 4 in the morning. It rang 4 times. Yes, Emeka's voice was alert immediately, the way it always was when unknown numbers called at unusual hours. "Is this Emeka?" The voice was old and careful and formal, the voice of someone who had decided to do something difficult and was doing it properly. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Mrs. Felicia Adami. I am a neighbor of your mother's. Admiralty Way, Lekki." A pause. "I am sorry to call so late. I have to tell you something about your mother." He sat up in bed. The room, his bedroom in the Victoria Island apartment, a room that was large and calm and expensive, was dark. He turned on the bedside light. "Tell me," he said. Mrs. Felicia told him. She told him carefully and in order, the way careful people tell things. She told him about the eating patterns she had observed. She told him about the remarks she had overheard through the compound wall. She told him about the general conditions. She told him about the evening before, about the plate carried to the backyard, about Ajora on the ground next to the dog's enclosure. Emeka was very still while she spoke, very, very still. When she finished, he said, "Thank you, Mrs. Felicia, thank you for calling." "I should have called earlier," she said. "I'm sorry." "You called," he said. "That is what matters." He ended the call. He sat in the dark of his bedroom for 3 minutes and 14 seconds. He counted them because he was counting his breath, counting his thoughts, counting the distance between the feeling that was building in his chest and the action he was about to take. He was not a person who lost control. He never had been. Growing up with limited resources in a challenging environment, working with galleries and collectors and agents and international partners, he had learned early that control was essential, that the person who controls their response controls the situation, that emotion not managed becomes energy wasted. But in 3 minutes and 14 seconds of sitting in the dark, he felt something move through him that tested every wall he had ever built. He thought about cold food. He thought about 11 years of cold food. He thought about an envelope saved naira by naira from a maid's salary. He thought about the cracked frame on the wall of a boy's quarters. He thought about his mother saying again and again, "I am fine, don't worry about me." He thought about her on the ground next to two dogs, eating what had been given to her, in the backyard of a house that she had cleaned and cooked in and maintained for 11 years. He got up. He got dressed. He did not change out of what he had been sleeping in. He put a white linen shirt over it, the good one, the one he wore when he needed to walk into rooms with authority. He picked up his car keys. He walked to the parking garage. He got in the Lamborghini. He drove from Victoria Island to Lekki at 4:30 in the morning. There was almost no traffic. The car covered the distance in a time that should not have been possible but was, because nobody is going to stop a matte black Lamborghini moving with purpose through a Lagos pre-dawn. He did not call his mother. He did not want her to have time to prepare. He did not want the version she would prepare, the composed, protective version, the "I am fine, don't worry about me" version. He wanted to arrive. He wanted to see. He turned onto Admiralty Way as the first gray light of morning was beginning to dilute the darkness. He drove slowly down the street. He found the address he had visited once 2 years ago briefly, picking his mother up for a rare Sunday outing. He remembered the gate, the compound, the garden that used to be a garden. He parked outside. He did not park quietly. He did not ease the car to the curb. He pulled up with the particular arrival of a Lamborghini, low, wide, unmistakable, the engine note settling from its highway register to a deep, present idle that could be heard clearly from inside any house on that street. He cut the engine. He sat for a moment. Then he got out of the car. It was 6:45 in the morning. Inside the Coker house, Mrs. Bissy Coker was in her kitchen. She was not usually up this early, but she had a function to attend, a naming ceremony for her sister's grandchild, and she wanted to be out of the house by 8. She was in a good mood. She had a new wrapper for the occasion, which she had been looking forward to wearing, and the Lagos morning had a quality of light that she found flattering through her kitchen window. She had her tea and was going over the mental list of what she needed to take to the ceremony. In the boys' quarters, Adjora was awake. She was always awake early. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, looking at the cracked frame drawing, Emeka's first drawing of her, as she did every morning before beginning her day. It was a ritual. It was the thing that set her direction before the house's noise arrived. She was thinking about the previous evening. She was thinking about the backyard and the concrete and the two dogs, Brutus, who had looked at her with mild curiosity, and King, who had ignored her completely and focused on his own bowl. And she was thinking about the plate of food and the expression on Mrs. Coker's face when she had said "same level," and the small, cold smile that had accompanied the words. She was not crying. She was past crying about things like this. But she was thinking, for the first time with genuine seriousness, that perhaps the time for staying had passed. Perhaps she had stayed long enough. Perhaps Emeka was right that she did not need to be here anymore. Perhaps the envelope was full enough. She was thinking this when she heard the car. She heard it before she saw it, the engine note of something expensive and low, settling outside the gate. She was not a person who paid close attention to car sounds ordinarily, but this particular sound had a quality that made her look up from the cracked frame and listen. Then she heard the gate knock. 3 knocks, firm, unhurried, the knock of someone who is not uncertain about whether the gate will open. The security guard, a young man named Segun who was new and nervous, called through the intercom. "Who is there?" "My name is Emeka Obi," said the voice on the other side of the gate. "I am here for my mother. Her name is Adjora Obi. She works in this house." Adjora stood up from the bed. She moved to the window of the boys' quarters. From the window she could see the compound, and beyond the compound wall she could see the top of a car. A matte black car that was very low to the ground and very wide. A car that was unmistakable even to someone who knew nothing about cars. She pressed both hands flat against the window frame. "Emeka," she whispered. Inside the main house, Mrs. Coker had heard the gate knock. She had heard the intercom exchange. She came out of the kitchen to the compound. She was in her wrapper still, morning face, tea in hand. "Who is at the gate?" she called to Segun. "Someone asking for Adjora, Ma," Segun said. "Says he is her son." Mrs. Coker's face arranged itself into the expression it wore when things were happening that she considered inconvenient. Her maid's relatives were, by her definition, an inconvenience. She had a policy about visitors to staff. "Tell him this is not visiting hour," she said. "Adjora is working. He can come back on Sunday." Segun looked uncertain. He looked at the gate. He looked back at Mrs. Coker. "Ma," he said carefully, "the person outside is." "Tell him what I said." Segun went to the gate. He opened the small side panel. He looked at the person outside. He looked at the car behind the person. He turned back toward Mrs. Coker. "Ma," he said, "I think you should come." Mrs. Coker was not a woman who appreciated being told what to do by her gate guard. Her expression sharpened. She set down her teacup on the compound wall with a deliberate click, and she walked to the gate herself. She opened the large gate manually and looked out. Emeka Obi was standing in front of the gate in a white linen shirt over a white t-shirt and dark trousers. Barefoot, he had not put on shoes. He had left in such focused haste that shoes had not registered. He was tall, his father's height, broad-shouldered, with Adjora's exact eyes in his face. He was 29 years old, and he had the particular stillness of a person who has very large emotions completely under control and who knows exactly what they are about to do. Behind him, taking up most of the road width, was the Lamborghini. Mrs. Coker looked at the car, looked at the man, looked at the car again. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, not of him specifically but of what the car meant. A recalibration. The particular recalibration of a person who has been operating with a certain set of assumptions and who is suddenly encountering information that does not fit those assumptions. "Good morning," Emeka said. His voice was calm, completely calm. "My name is Emeka Obi. I am Adjora Obi's son. Is she here?" Mrs. Coker's mouth opened, closed. Yes, I wasn't expecting." She looked at the car again. She looked at his face. "She's in the back." "I know," he said. "May I come in?" In a different set of circumstances. In the circumstances she had been operating in for 11 years, which involved a maid whose son was a struggling artist and who was definitively and permanently below her in every measurable social category. Mrs. Coker would have said no. She would have said visitors must arrange in advance. She would have sent a message and closed the gate. She stepped aside. She let him in. He walked past her into the compound. He did not look at the house. He looked at the boys' quarters at the back. He walked directly toward it. Adjora was standing in the doorway of the boys' quarters. She had not moved since the window. She had been standing there, watching, as the gate opened and her son walked in. And now he was crossing the compound toward her, and she was looking at him, and something in her face, something that she had been holding for a very long time, that had grown heavier with every month in this house, was letting go. He crossed the compound in 10 steps. He reached her. He stopped 1 step in front of her. They looked at each other. She took in everything, the white shirt, the barefoot, the particular expression on his face that was her expression, the one she saw in the mirror when she was trying to hold something large in without spilling it. "Emeka," she said. Her voice was almost nothing. "Mama," he said. And then he did what he had done when he was a child and something was too big for words. He put his arms around her. He held her the way children hold the people they love when they have been away too long, completely, without reservation, without calculation about how long or what it looked like. She held him back, her arms around him, her face against his shoulder. And she felt the weight leave. Not all of it, not immediately, But it began right there in the doorway of the boys' quarters of the Coker house to lift. "I'm taking you home," he said into her hair. "Right now, today." "My things," she started. "Whatever fits in the car comes today. Everything else I will send someone for. But you are not sleeping in this room again." She did not argue. She did not say, "I am fine," or "Don't worry about me," or "Your business." She said nothing. She simply held him and let herself be held. Behind them, Mrs. Coker had followed into the compound. She was standing near the center of the compound with her teacup. She had retrieved it from the wall, held in both hands, watching this reunion with an expression that was shifting, slowly and visibly, from its previous comfortable confidence into something else. Into the first genuine uncertainty she had felt about this situation since Adjora had arrived 11 years ago. When Emeka finally released his mother, gently, slowly, keeping his hands on her shoulders and looking at her face with the careful attention he gave to things he needed to understand fully, he turned and looked at Mrs. Coker. He looked at her for a long moment. Mrs. Coker looked back. She was making rapid internal adjustments. The Lamborghini, the bearing of this young man, the quality of his clothes, the way he had walked into her compound as if he had every right to be there. She was calculating. "You are the madam of this house?" Emeka asked. "Yes," Mrs. Coker said. "Yes, I am. And I want you to know Adjora she has been well looked after here. We treat all our staff." "I want to speak with you," he said, "after my mother has packed her things." Mrs. Coker blinked. "Of course, yes, of course." He turned back to his mother. 15 minutes, Mama. Take what matters most. I will carry everything." Adjora went inside. Emeka stood in the compound doorway and waited. His face was turned toward the boys' quarters, but he was aware, with the peripheral awareness of a person who has spent years in rooms where negotiation was happening, of Mrs. Coker behind him. He was aware of her adjustments, her recalculations, the social arithmetic she was doing right now, trying to assess exactly how concerned she needed to be about the arrival of this particular car and this particular person. She needed to be very concerned, but he was going to let the moment with his mother happen first. Adjora packed in 12 minutes. She had, after 11 years, very little that was irreplaceable. The cracked frame drawing, the photograph of Chukwudi, a small Bible, her clothes. The envelope empty now, its purpose fulfilled years ago, but kept because she could not bring herself to throw it away. She put these things in a bag and she looked around the room. She looked at it fully for the last time. She was not going to miss it. She carried the bag out. Emeka took it from her immediately. "Is that everything?" he asked. "That's everything," she said. He turned to Mrs. Coker. "Now," he said pleasantly, "let us talk." Mrs. Bissy Coker was not a woman who was often at a disadvantage in her own compound. This was her space. These walls were her authority. For 11 years she had been entirely in control of everything that happened within them. But standing in her compound at 7 in the morning in her morning wrapper, with her tea going cold in her hands, looking at a young man in a white linen shirt who had arrived in a car that cost more than her house, she felt something she did not typically feel in this compound. She felt small. She did not know how to manage this feeling because she had not practiced managing it. She had spent too many years in control. "Let's sit," Emeka said. He was looking around the compound. He looked at the garden, neglected. He looked at the boys' quarters, small, concrete, the window set high in the wall. He looked at the dog's enclosure. He looked at the ground in front of the enclosure. Something moved in his face, just briefly, just for a moment. Then it settled back to calm. "We can stand," Mrs. Coker said. She was trying to reassert something, some territorial claim, something that put her back in the position of the person who decided things in this space. "Fine," Emeka said. He looked at her directly. "How long has my mother worked for you?" 11 years, Mrs. Coker said. She said it with a slight emphasis that seemed to suggest this was evidence of something, of fairness, of continuity, of the provision of steady employment over an extended period. 11 years, he said. In that time, what was she paid? Mrs. Coker named a figure. A monthly figure that was, by Lagos domestic worker standards of 11 years ago, at the bottom of the acceptable range, and that had not increased significantly in a decade. Emeka received this number without visible reaction. And her living conditions, he said, the room in the boys' quarters. She had a room. I saw it, he said. 12 years ago that room would have been difficult for a person as a living space. He paused. What about her food? She received meals. I know what she received, he said quietly. I know about the cold food, the small portions. I know about the yard. He looked at the dog's enclosure again. He looked at the ground in front of it. I know about last night. Mrs. Coker's face changed. The color changed. She told you. Someone else told me, he said. My mother has not complained to me once in 11 years, not once. She told me she was fine. Every time I asked her if she was fine, she said she was fine. He paused. She was not fine. The compound was very quiet. Segun the guard had found something important to do on the far side of the gate. Inside the main house, the sound of children waking could be heard faintly. The Coker children, teenagers now, whose domestic comfort had been maintained and served for 11 years by the woman who had just packed her bag in 12 minutes. I want to be clear with you, Emeka said, in the same pleasant, level tone he had been using throughout. I am not here to shout. I am not here to threaten. I am here to take my mother home, which I am doing. He paused. But I also want you to understand something. Mrs. Coker looked at him. She was very still. My mother has worked in this house for 11 years. She has cooked your food, cleaned your surfaces, raised your children's comfort standards, maintained this property, and absorbed treatment that no human being should absorb. She has done all of this while telling me she was fine because she did not want to worry me. He let that settle for a moment. Her salary across 11 years, calculated at the rate you paid, comes to a specific number. It is not a large number. It is not close to a large number. He paused. Do you know what a painting of mine sold for in London 8 months ago? Mrs. Coker shook her head slightly. She was not sure she wanted to know. He told her the Naira equivalent. She looked at him. One painting, he said. 8 months ago. He paused. My mother paid for my education by working in houses like this one. She could not be with me. She missed years of my life, real years, years that you cannot get back because she was here, keeping your house and absorbing whatever you decided she deserved to absorb. A long silence. I have a question, he said, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer, not for my benefit, for yours. The question is, what did you think was going to happen? Mrs. Coker said nothing. Did you think there would be no consequence? He said. Did you think the person you were treating this way had no life outside this compound? No son? No future? He tilted his head very slightly. Or did you simply not think about it at all? Mrs. Coker's mouth opened. She said nothing. There was nothing available to say. Emeka looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded once, a small, finalizing nod, the nod of a person who has said what needed saying and has no interest in prolonging it. I am leaving with my mother now, he said. Her full salary for this month will be expected by the end of the week. Any outstanding owed amounts. I will be looking at the records. You will hear from my lawyer about what comes next. He turned. He walked to where his mother was standing. He picked up her bag. He put his hand gently at her back, careful, the way you are careful with someone you love, and he walked her toward the gate. At the gate, Ajora paused. She turned and looked back at the compound, at the house, at the garden, at 11 years of her life contained in this space. She looked at Mrs. Coker, who was still standing in the middle of the compound with her cold tea, her morning wrapper, her function she was supposed to be getting ready for, her house that was about to feel very different without the person who had been holding it together. Ajora looked at her. She did not say anything cruel. She was not built for cruelty. She simply said, quietly and without particular emphasis, "God bless you." Then she walked through the gate. Behind her, Emeka pulled the gate closed, not slammed, closed firmly with finality. Ajora stood on the road outside and looked at the Lamborghini. She looked at it for a moment, the length of it, the depth of its color, the absolute reality of its existence on this Lekki road at 7 in the morning, and then she looked at her son. He was watching her face. "Is this yours?" she said. "Yes." She looked at the car again. She walked slowly around the front of it, looking at every detail, taking it in with the same focused attention that Emeka brought to paintings. She ran one hand along the hood. Then she straightened up and looked at him across the car. "You said you wanted one since you were 15, she said. "I did. And now you have it." "I do." She nodded slowly. Something in her face, the composed face, the face she had been maintaining for 11 years, was rearranging itself. Not into tears, not into dramatic feeling, into something quieter and more permanent. Into the face of a person who has been waiting for a long time for something to be true, and who is now, finally, standing inside the truth of it. "Let's go home," she said. He opened the passenger door. She got in. He put the bag in the boot. He got in on the driver's side. He started the engine. The sound of the Lamborghini starting on Admiralty Way was, according to Mrs. Felicia Adami, who was watching from her kitchen window, the most satisfying sound she had heard in 20 years of retirement. They drove away. The apartment was in Victoria Island. It was on the 14th floor of a building that had been built 4 years ago, and that had aged into the skyline the way good buildings do, with presence rather than ostentation. The building had a view of the Lagos Lagoon. Not all apartments had the view. Emeka had paid specifically for the view. He had never brought his mother here. She had never asked to come, and he had never pushed, respecting a dynamic that he now understood had been her protection mechanism, keeping her Lagos life and her work life separate, keeping the distance that allowed her to be fine, without the contrast of his world making her situation inarguably visible. As the lift opened onto the 14th floor, and he led her to the door and let her in, he watched her face carefully. She stood in the entrance and looked. It was a good apartment, large, more than 2,000 square feet, clean, with high ceilings and the particular quality of light that you get at that height, that distance from ground-level noise and obstruction. It was also very clearly an artist's apartment. There were paintings on every wall, his own work in pieces by artists he collected, Nigerian mostly but some international. There were books everywhere, on shelves and stacked on surfaces, art history and theory and novels and biographies. There was a work table near the large windows with materials on it, charcoal, various pencils, sketch pads, because he still drew daily, even when he was not painting formally. It was a lived-in space, seriously lived in, by a person who used every room. Ajora walked slowly into the living room. She moved to the main wall where 6 of his paintings hung, significant pieces, works she had never seen in person. She stood in front of them. She looked at each one in turn, taking her time. She came to the one in the center, the largest one. It was her, painted from memory, from a visit when she was perhaps 55, standing at a window he must have imagined because the window did not belong to any room she recognized. Standing at a window looking out with the light on her face, her working hands folded in front of her, her face in 3/4 profile, not looking at the painter but at whatever was outside the window, something the viewer could not see, something private. She stood in front of it for a long time. "When did you paint this?" she said. 4 years ago. From memory. From memory, and from every drawing of you I have made since I was 3 years old. She looked at it, at her own face in paint on his wall, at the way he had seen her, not as the maid, not as the sacrifice, not as the patient endurer, but as a woman at a window looking at something with light on her face. "Emeka," she said, and her voice had that quality again, the quality she only allowed when it was just the two of them. "This is beautiful." "You are beautiful," he said simply. She turned and looked at him. He was standing in the middle of his living room in his white linen shirt and his bare feet and paint-stained hands, and he was 29 years old, and he had driven to Lekki at 4 in the morning and brought her home. She crossed the room and held him again. This time it was different from the compound, no audience, no drama, no performance of any kind. Just a mother and son in a room full of paintings, holding each other in the morning light. "I should have come sooner," he said into her hair. "You came," she said. "Not soon enough." "Mecca," she pulled back enough to look at his face. "Listen to me. What you have built, what you have done, do you understand what I see when I look at this apartment, at that car, at you?" She touched his face with both hands. "I see every naira, every envelope, every cold meal, every Saturday studio class and every late night and every competition and every year. I see it all. And I am telling you it was worth it. Every bit of it was worth it." She paused. "You did not let me down. You were never, not for one single day, a burden or a worry or a regret. You were the reason. You were always the reason." He was quiet for a moment. "You are staying here," he said. "Permanently. I am not taking you anywhere else. This is your home now." She looked around the apartment. "It's a little modern for me," she said. "We will fix that. The kitchen looks complicated." "Patience is a virtue, Mama." "That is not funny." "It is a little funny." The corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. "I need my own room," she said. "Not your room, my own room." "3 bedrooms," he said. "Pick the one you want." "And I need a place to pray in the morning." "The corner by the window. The light is good there in the morning." "I need to be able to cook." "The kitchen is yours. I can't cook anyway." "I know. I raised you and I still couldn't teach you." This time she did smile, a real one. He showed her the bedroom she chose, the one with the east-facing window, the one that got the morning light first. He made up the bed himself badly, with the particular incompetence of someone who has always had better things to do than learn to make beds properly, and she fixed it after him without comment. He brought her bag in. She unpacked it herself, placing her things in the drawers and on the shelf with the deliberate care of a person who is, for the first time in a very long time, arranging a space that is entirely and permanently her own. Last, she put the cracked frame drawing on the wall above the chest of drawers. She stepped back and looked at it. 7-year-old Emeka's portrait of her. Her 4-year-old eyes on a wall in Victoria Island, Lagos, on the 14th floor, with a view of the lagoon. "Good," she said. Emeka's legal team was led by a lawyer named Barrister Ngozi Okafor. No relation to any other Okafor in this story. Simply a woman who had spent 22 years practicing employment and civil rights, law, and who had, in those 22 years, developed a particular commitment to cases involving domestic workers whose rights had been violated. He had met her through Dr. Okonkwo's network. She had done pro bono work for the Lagos Light Foundation on an employment dispute involving a gallery assistant. When Emeka called her 3 days after bringing his mother home and explained the situation, she listened in her precise, contained way and then said, "I need to see her." She came to the apartment the following day. She sat across from Adjora at the kitchen table. Adjora had cooked a full midday meal because the kitchen was hers and she was using it, and she asked questions. She was not aggressive in her questioning. She was thorough. She asked about dates, about specific incidents, about the food, the room, the verbal treatment over 11 years. She asked about last evening, the backyard, the dogs, the specific words Mrs. Coker had used. Adjora told her everything. All of it for the first time, without any of the protective editing she had been applying for years. She told it steadily and in order, with the detail of a person who had been living inside these events and remembering every one. Barrister Ngozi wrote constantly. When Ajora was done, the lawyer looked at what she had written. Then she looked at Ajora. "You have never spoken about this before," she said. "Not a question." "No." "Why?" "Because my son needed to build his business without distraction." Barrister Ngozi held this for a moment. "Mrs. Obi," she said, "you have grounds for multiple claims. Failure to maintain safe working conditions, psychological harm from sustained workplace mistreatment, wage theft. There are unpaid overtime amounts that were owed to you under Nigerian labor law that were never paid. And what happened last evening, I will argue that constitutes humiliating and degrading treatment of an employee, which is actionable." Ajora looked at her. "She has a family," Ajora said. "Children I don't want to destroy." "I understand that," Barrister Ngozi said, "but I want to ask you to consider something. If no consequence comes from this, the next woman in that house will experience the same thing, and the one after her. People who behave this way in situations of power continue until something makes them stop." She paused. "A case does not have to destroy a family, but it has to be real. It has to be a real consequence." Ajora was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands on the kitchen table, the same hands in the painting on the living room wall. "Do what is right," she said. "Not what is revenge, what is right." "That is exactly what I will do," Barrister Ngozi said. The case was filed 4 weeks after Ajora left the Coker house. It was filed under 3 sections of Nigerian labor law and included a civil suit for psychological harm. It was filed properly, formally, with documentation. Emeka's team had, in the weeks between his mother's departure and the filing, gathered supporting evidence including testimony from Mrs. Felicia Ademi, a formal statement from Segun the gate guard, who had quietly agreed to speak in return for assistance finding new employment, and receipts and records that established the wage discrepancies over 11 years. The case took 10 months. It was not a simple case. Mrs. Coker had engaged her own legal representation, a firm that handled the initial stages aggressively, challenging the characterization of events, questioning the reliability of witnesses, trying to establish a counter-narrative in which Ajora had been a well-treated employee whose son was simply wealthy and aggressive and looking for a payout. But Barrister Ngozi was not simple either, and Ajora's testimony, patient, specific, undramatic, the testimony of someone who had been living inside these facts and had simply decided to tell the truth about them, was not the testimony of someone looking for a payout. It was the testimony of someone reporting what had happened, clearly and completely, as if she were reading from a document she had been keeping in her mind for 11 years. Which, in a sense, she had been. The judgment was delivered on a Thursday. Emeka was in the courtroom. Barrister Ngozi sat at the plaintiff's table with her files. Mrs. Coker was at the defense table, noticeably thinner than she had been in the months before the case began, in a formal outfit that was more formal than the situation required, as if formality could provide some structural support that was otherwise unavailable. The judge found in Ajora's favor on all 3 counts. Mrs. Coker was ordered to pay 11 years of outstanding overtime owed. She was ordered to pay compensation for psychological harm over the sustained period. She was ordered to pay Mrs. Felicia Ademi's reasonable expenses as a witness. And the judge added, in the judgment text, a passage that Barrister Ngozi would quote to colleagues for years afterward. The plaintiff's case demonstrates a pattern of behavior that this court finds not only legally actionable but profoundly troubling in its sustained, deliberate nature. The plaintiff endured 11 years of diminishing treatment in silence, not from weakness, but from love for her child. This court notes that the depth of sacrifice involved in the plaintiff's conduct over this period is something the defendant was benefiting from while simultaneously failing in the basic duties of an employer and a human being. The damages awarded are not excessive. If anything, no financial sum is adequate to the facts of this case. Emeka read that passage in the courtroom, and he was very still. Mrs. Coker was also ordered to issue a formal public apology, which was published in a Lagos newspaper, brief, legal in tone, carefully worded by her lawyers to admit as little as possible while technically complying with the court's order. But it was published. It existed. It was a record. Adjora received the judgment without dramatic emotion. She sat in the courtroom when it was read, and she held her hands together in her lap, and she looked at the judge and she listened, and when it was done she said, very quietly, "Thank you." On the drive home, not in the Lamborghini, which she had privately informed Emeka she found slightly excessive for daily life, but in the second car, a sensible SUV he had bought at her suggestion, she looked out the window at Lagos passing and she said, "Your father would have wanted to see that." "I know," Emeka said. "He would have said something about how justice takes time but always arrives." "He would have said it better than that," Emeka said. "He would have hummed something." She laughed, the full, genuine laugh that he loved, the one that had been infrequent in the Coker house years, and that was becoming more frequent in the Victoria Island apartment with each passing week. "He would have hummed something," she agreed. They drove home in the Lagos afternoon traffic, and the radio played something she did not recognize, but that she found pleasant, and she watched the city from the window, and she thought about her mother in Ennui and the fabric table, and the philosophy of small money saved every day, and she thought about Chakwuti's gap-toothed smile, and she thought about a burnt stick drawing on a concrete floor, and she thought about an envelope that had once seemed impossibly slow to fill, and that was now empty and unnecessary and gone. She thought about the next step. For the first time in 30 years, she had no idea what the next step was. There was no envelope to fill, no fees to save toward, no particular distance to cover. She looked out the window. The next step, she decided, was simply this: being here. Being present in this city, in this life, in this apartment with the lagoon view and the east-facing window and the cracked frame drawing on the wall. The next step was living. 3 weeks after the judgment, Emeka told his mother he had a surprise. She was in the kitchen, her kitchen. She had made it thoroughly hers in the months since arriving, reorganizing everything to her own logic and adding certain items she had decided were missing, including a specific wooden spoon she had bought from a market in Isle Eco, and a mortar and pestle of a size that Emeka said was aggressive but that she maintained was the correct size for anyone who was serious about cooking. When he came and stood in the doorway and said, "Mama, I have something to show you." She looked at him. He had the expression he wore when he was particularly pleased about something, the expression that was exactly his father's expression, the one that appeared before a gap-toothed smile that Emeka did not quite have, but that showed up as something near it in his eyes. "What have you done?" she said. "Come." She followed him to the living room. On the coffee table was a folder. He opened it. Inside were 2 documents and a photograph. The photograph was of a beach. Not a Lagos beach. A different beach, white sand, water of a particular blue that was different from Lagos blue, a line of palm trees, a sky that was the exact color of contentment. "Maldives," Emeka said. She looked at the photograph, then at him. "The documents," he said, "are our plane tickets and the hotel booking, 2 weeks. We leave on Friday." She looked at the photograph again. She had never, in 53 years of life, 53 years of Ennui and Agegunnel and the Seruler house and the Aikja house and the Coker house and the envelope and the next step and the next step, she had never been on a plane. She looked at the beach in the photograph. She looked at her son. "Will it be cold?" she asked. "In the Maldives. I get cold easily." "It will not be cold," he said. "It will be warm. There will be water the color of that photograph. There will be food that you did not cook and that will be warm when it reaches you, and there will be as much of it as you want." He paused. "And there will be a bed with proper linen and a view of the ocean and nowhere you need to be at any particular time except wherever you want to be." She looked at the photograph one more time. And a mortar and pestle, she said. He looked at her. In the Maldives, a girl needs her tools. Mama. I'm joking, she said. I know what a joke is, Emeka. He shook his head, but the expression on his face, the gap-tooth adjacent expression, was fully present now. Friday, he said. Friday, she agreed. They went on Friday. Emeka flew them first class, he had offered. She had said it was excessive. He had said she had been eating cold food for 11 years, and she was flying first class, and that was final. She had looked at the seats when they boarded and said, "These are very large seats," with the measured approval of a person who appreciates quality while withholding the kind of enthusiasm that might suggest she had ever wanted anything. She looked out the window for the entire takeoff and said nothing, but her hands were very still in her lap, which Emeka understood to mean she was containing a significant feeling. When they reached altitude and the clouds were below them, and the sky was the deep blue that only exists at that height, she looked out the window for a long time. Then she said very quietly, not quite to him, not quite to herself, "Chukwudi, look at this." He said nothing. He looked out the window with her. The Maldives were everything the photograph had promised. More because photographs are always smaller than the thing. The water was the color. The sky was the color. The air had a quality, warm, salted, moving, that she had not imagined. The hotel was on its own small island, accessible only by a short boat ride from the main airport, and when the boat docked and they walked up the jetty and the manager came to greet them and said, with genuine warmth, "Welcome, Mrs. Obi." Using her name, her real name, not Ajora or the Maid or nothing at all, she stood on the jetty for a moment and breathed. Just breathed. The room, the villa, technically, it had its own private section of beach, had a bed with white linen and a ceiling fan, and a view of the ocean from every window and a private pool, that Ajora regarded with the measured approval of someone who had seen private pools in the Coker house, but had been reminded regularly that the pool was not for her. This pool was for her. She swam in it that evening while Emeka sat on the deck and read. She was not a strong swimmer. She had learned the basics as a child in a river near Ennui, but she moved through the water with the particular quality of someone who is experiencing something they have been owed for a long time and who is receiving it without guilt, which is the hardest part. At dinner, the hotel restaurant, a long table by the water, candles, the sound of gentle waves, she ate everything. She ate it warm. She ordered a second course without being asked if she wanted it and without calculating the cost. She ate with the appetite of a person who has rediscovered what it feels like to be hungry in the presence of food and to simply eat it. Emeka watched her. He did not say anything. He simply watched her eat, the way she had once watched him draw, with a focused, private pleasure that needed no external validation. She was on her second course when she paused and looked at him. "You know what I am thinking," she said. "Tell me." "I am thinking about your mother's mother, my mother in Ennui, Ngozi." She paused. She used to say, "Small money saved every day builds big money over time. There is no shortcut. There is only the next step." He nodded. "She was right," Ajora said, "but she was describing one kind of journey, the journey I walked." She looked at the water, at the candle, at the darkness beyond the candle where the ocean was. "You took the same philosophy and you walked a different journey with it, faster, bigger, more beautiful." She looked at him. "I want you to know I understand that. Both journeys are the same journey, just different scales." She paused. "I am very proud of you." "You have told me," he said. "I know, I will keep telling you." "I know," he said, "I will keep listening." She smiled, the full one, the one without reservation. They stayed for 2 weeks. They walked on the beach in the mornings, early, before the other guests were up, in the slanted gold of pre-dawn Maldives light that Emeka said was unlike any light he had painted. He had brought a sketchbook. He drew constantly, the light on the water, the sand in different angles of sun, his mother walking ahead of him on the beach, her silhouette in the morning, her face at various moments of the day. He drew her sitting at the edge of the private pool with her feet in the water, looking at something he could not see. He drew her at dinner, mid-laugh. In the candlelight. He drew her at the beach in the evening with the waves at her feet and the sky going orange and rose and purple behind her. He drew her the way he had always drawn her, as the most important person in his world, as the light that everything else was measured against, as the subject who never stopped being interesting or beautiful or worthy of his entire attention. On the last evening, she found him on the deck, sketchbook open, drawing the ocean. She sat beside him. He showed her what he had drawn page after page of the 2 weeks. Her face, the water, the light, the beach, the food, the villa, all of it. She turned the pages slowly. She came to a drawing of herself on the beach in the early morning, silhouette against the water, hands loose at her sides, looking at the horizon. She looked at it for a long time. "This is how you see me," she said. "Always," he said, "since I was 3. She closed the sketchbook gently. She handed it back to him. She looked at the ocean for a while. "We are going to do this again," she said. It was not a question. "Every year," he said, "more than every year." "Good." A pause, the sound of the water, the evening air, the particular piece of a place where nothing needed to be done next. "A Mecca," she said. "Yes. Your father is with us here. I can feel it." He looked at the water. "I know," he said. "He is proud. He is humming something." "What is he humming?" She listened, or pretended to listen, or did something that existed between the two. "Something from home," she said. "I can't quite hear it, but it's something from home." They sat together on the deck until the light was completely gone and the stars were out. More stars than either of them had ever seen from Lagos, stars that the Maldives sky offered with a generosity that the city sky could not match. And the ocean was dark and present, and the sound of it was the sound of something vast and patient and permanent. And Ajora Chidinma Obi, who had eaten cold food for 11 years and saved money in an envelope, and prayed in a boys' quarters room with a cracked frame drawing on the wall, sat under the stars of the Maldives next to her son and felt, with complete clarity and without any remaining doubt, that the next step had arrived. Not a step forward, not a step toward something, simply arrival. She had arrived. There is a matte black Lamborghini that is sometimes seen in Lagos, driving through Victoria Island in the early evening, moving the way expensive things move, with that particular unhurried certainty, that knowledge of its own weight. If you look carefully through the passenger window, you will sometimes see a woman. Not young. In her 50s, her hair natural and short, her clothes good but not showy, her hands, if you could see them, the hands of a person who has worked them for decades and who wears that working history with complete, unself-conscious dignity. She is looking out the window, at Lagos, at the city that took so much from her and that now, in the most unexpected way, at the most unexpected time, in the most unexpected form, has given it all back and more besides. Her name is Ajora Chidinma Obi. She was a maid for 20 years. She ate cold food. She lived in small rooms. She filled an envelope month by month with the savings from a salary that was never enough, for a cause that was completely enough, her son's future. Her son is a millionaire. Her son is a celebrated artist whose paintings hang on walls in Lagos and London and New York, and in a gallery in Ikoyi that she attended opening night of in a new dress that she chose herself, from a boutique she had never shopped in before, where nobody told her what she was allowed to touch. Her son is the person he is because of her. And she is the person she is because she decided, a long time ago, that love was not something you felt. It was something you did. It was an action, repeated every day, in cold kitchens and small rooms and the backyard next to the dogs and the envelope and the next step and the next step and the next step, until the day arrived, The particular, specific, unrepeatable Tuesday morning when a Lamborghini turned onto Admiralty Way, and a young man in a white linen shirt got out of it and came home. He came home. He always was going to come home. She always knew it. That is the story of Ajora Obi, the woman who ate cold food so her son could eat warm, the woman who stayed so her son could go, the woman whose love was so large and so certain and so patient that not even 11 years of cruelty could diminish it by a single degree. And if you are watching this right now with your mother in your mind, if there is a face that appeared when this story started, a face of someone who gave things up so you could have them, who ate last so you could eat first, who was quiet about the cost so you could focus on the future, go and call that person. Right now, after this video, put down your phone and call them and say whatever you have been meaning to say and keeping back and saving for later. Say it now. Later is not guaranteed. Now is what you have. This has been Tribal Tales Hub. If this story moved you, if you felt it like this video right now, it takes 1 second and it tells us that these stories matter. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub and hit the bell. We bring you stories that touch the heart, that tell the truth, that celebrate the people who hold everything together. Don't miss a single one. Drop a comment right now. Tell us about a sacrifice your mother made for you. Tell us her name. Honor her right here in this comment section. She deserves every word you write. Share this video. Someone you know needs to hear this story today. Send it to them. Let them know. This is Tribal Tales Hub. See you in the next story.